This is indeed a good news. The people held hostage in Gaza has finally been released by America.
Delta forces have entered the territory of Gaza. The attacks of armed militant groups operating in the Middle East against U.S. military bases would have worn out the patience of the Pentagon. The Pentagon administration has sent U.S. troops to the territory of Gaza. The Delta Force, known as the best special forces unit in the world, entered the Gaza tunnels and rescued all the hostages held captive in the tunnels. The people of Israel have started their victory celebrations. The decisions taken by the Biden administration, which has been providing military support to the Israeli army since the beginning of the war, have led to a much more complicated deconfliction of the war between Israel and Palestine. As it is known, last month Bloomberg revealed a list of weapons and ammunition that the United States had secretly sent to Israel. The fact that the United States is indirectly participating in the war has led to the targeting of U.S. military bases in the Middle East. First, the Houthis, and then Iranian-backed armed militant groups launched airstrikes against U.S. Navy ships and military bases. The discovery that Iranian unmanned combat aircraft were used in attacks on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq changed the course of the war. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin announced that the Delta Force, a special forces unit of the United States, has been sent to the territory of Israel. As it is known, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby had previously stated in a statement that some soldiers and generals serving in the Delta Force had been sent to Israeli territory. However, he stated that these soldiers only made strategy and planning, did not directly intervene in the war. However, during the day, the U.S. soldiers who came out of the underground tunnels in the Nuseirat camp area became the subject of the agenda all over the world. Together with the military operation organized by U.S. troops in the Nuseirat camp area located in the Gaza Strip, 77 hostages held by militants were rescued. 114 armed militants hiding in underground tunnels in the Nuseirat camp area were neutralized by U.S. soldiers. The Israeli intelligence service Mossad has been working to determine the location of underground tunnels located within the Gaza borders for a long time. He found that access to underground tunnels was provided from an old museum in the Nuseirat camp area, where Gaza militants are concentrated. IDF officials made a quick decision and decided to organize a military operation into this tunnel. However, the fact that the soldiers who came out of the tunnel at the end of the operation were U.S. soldiers became an issue of the agenda all over the world. The main purpose of the elite U.S. soldiers organizing this operation was to neutralize the militants hiding in the tunnels and make the tunnel completely unusable. However, when they entered the tunnels, it was seen that the hostages were being held here as prisoners, and the plan was changed. The Delta forces mobilized late at night and entered the Nuseirat camp area and entered the tunnels from inside the museum, which was in a state of rubble. After entering the tunnels, there was no news from the U.S. soldiers, who lost all contact with the Israel Defense Forces for a long time. For this reason, it was thought that U.S. soldiers lost their lives in the tunnels. However, the U.S. soldiers who managed to get out of the tunnels after 27 hours achieved a great success. These images of U.S. soldiers leaving the tunnel with 77 hostages with them were celebrated with great enthusiasm in Israel. Delta forces managed to not only rescue 77 hostages, but also neutralize a large number of Gaza militants. The statement made by the U.S. soldiers who returned to the Israeli borders after the operation was the subject of interest. One of the U.S. soldiers who participated in the operation stated that they walked for 3 kilometers immediately after entering the tunnel and that there were many different rooms inside the tunnel. According to the statement of the U.S. soldier, some of these rooms were used as prisons, while some of them were used as bedrooms by the militants. At the same time, there were also locked rooms for storing weapons and ammunition. U.S. soldiers, who found that Israeli hostages were also being held in these rooms, stated that they had saved the hostages by entering these rooms. There were also militants further down the tunnel, but they did not engage in any armed clashes to get the hostages out, the U.S. soldier said, adding that they made a quick exit from the tunnels. The Delta forces, who provided access to the tunnels almost like a ghost, placed plastic explosives at various points in the tunnel. After leaving the tunnel, the soldiers, who also placed explosives at the tunnel entrance, activated these explosives after they managed to exit the tunnel. It was announced by IDF officials that the explosion in the Nuseirat camp area during the day was also caused by this operation. The Delta Force, which managed to exit the tunnel safely, contacted the nearest Israeli unit and left the Nuseirat camp area. After the U.S. soldiers returned to the Israeli borders, the hostages were handed over to the Israeli army. 77 hostages were transferred to hospitals in the city of Tel Aviv to be treated. When most of the prisoners held as hostages in Gaza were rescued again, there was a big celebration in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally informed the families of the rescued hostages. After this operation, which was organized by the Delta Force, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu made some statements. Netanyahu said that 77 more hostages were rescued thanks to the support of the United States, and that they will soon achieve a great success on the territory of Gaza. Netanyahu, who stated that it is only a matter of time before all the hostages held captive in the territory of Gaza are rescued, recently announced that they will launch a large-scale ground operation against Gaza. The main reason why the Israeli army cannot carry out airstrikes on these tunnels and military sites in Gaza is that there are hostages in the hands of Gaza militants. The Israeli army, which does not want these hostages to be harmed, has kept its attacks to a minimum. However, it is a well-known fact that if the hostages in Gaza are literally rescued, the Israeli army will comprehensively enter the territory of Gaza. The Gaza militants are also fully aware of this situation. For this reason, the Gaza administration is not looking forward to a new prisoner swap agreement. Gaza militants are using these hostages as shields to prevent the Israeli army from launching airstrikes on Gaza territory. The Israeli Defense Ministry has presented a prisoner exchange agreement to the Gaza administration many times after the temporary ceasefire held earlier. However, these Israeli proposals were rejected each time by the Gaza leader, Yahya Sinwar. However, with the latest operation organized by U.S. troops, 77 more hostages in Gaza were successfully rescued. The U.S. administration had been making statements since the early days of the war that they were not directly intervening in the war, but were only providing military support to Israel. The United States, which had previously sent aircraft carriers and Navy ships to the eastern Mediterranean, was blocking airstrikes against Israel. However, U.S. soldiers were not involved in any military operations in Gaza. Recently, with Iran starting to intervene in this war and the U.S. presence in the Middle East coming under threat, the U.S. administration seems to have changed its decision. The Delta forces, known to the whole world, entered the territory of Gaza for the first time and achieved great success in their first operations. The Delta Force was sent to Gaza in order to prevent attacks by Iranian-backed armed militant groups on the United States and the spillover of the war to the Middle East, the U.S. Department of Defense said after this operation. Iran has been looking for an opportunity to seize oil resources in the Middle East for years. The Iranian government, which wants to turn this war between Israel and Palestine into an opportunity, is trying to ensure that Israel will be defeated with the armed militant groups it supports.